Sentire Media.
If there is one thing that Silvio Berlusconi enjoyed doing, it was telling jokes, especially to his partyfuls of young 20-odd-year-old girls in the company of old men. I doubt, however, that he ever told the following. So Berlusconi is driving late one night around the countryside in the Emilia area. He's whooshing along. At a certain point he feels a jolt, a crash, and something goes under the wheels. Good Lord, what could it be? He tells the driver to go out and have a look. They discover to their relief that it was a runaway pig from a nearby farm and not a person. Berlusconi enjoys big gestures, you have to give him that. So he tells the driver to go along to the farm and offer to pay for the pig. Off the driver goes and Berlusconi sits and waits. He waits, and waits, and waits. He tries calling the driver, but he's not answering his phone. A quarter of an hour passes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour passes. Finally, the driver comes back. He is very clearly drunk. His arms are full of all kinds of local delicacies, salamis, prosciutto, wine, and cheese. Berlusconi rolls down the window and looks at him and says, "What on earth are you doing? What happened?" The driver says, "Well, sir, I went to the farmhouse, and I said what you told me to say, and they just filled me with presents, and they were cheering and toasting to my good health, and saying I was a hero, and celebrating, and then they gave me all these presents, and told me good luck. I don't get it." And so Berlusconi says, "Well, what exactly did you say?" And the driver says, "Well, I knocked I knocked on the door, sir, and I said, I'm the driver of Silvio Berlusconi, and I've killed the pig." So, this is the last of our 3-part series in which we review Wondery's Bunga Bunga podcast and our own memories and experience of the Berlusconi era. Today, we're going to look at the third and last Berlusconi government from the elections in 2008 to the eventful year of 2011. Okay, so then the third Berlusconi government comes around. The elections are on the 13th and 14th of April 2008. He's back in power. The majority is good, but not quite as strong as the first time round. He spends a little bit less time doing his leggi ad personam, his tailor-made laws. Perhaps one biggie is the legittimo impedimento. Matteo, what does that mean?
Legittimo impedimento means that if you are... you have a role as a minister, and you are under trial. You can stay at home and don't
not go to trial.
Not go to trial because you have to do something more important.
Yes.
And so if there's a day you have to go to the court, and in this day you have something to do as a prime minister or. You just have to say, no, I've got something more important to do.
Exactly.
Next time I come.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Judge, you can't judge me today. I've got stuff to do.
We hope you come in soon, but...
yeah, that's all the magistrates could do. Say, please, can you come and tell us about this?
Yes, they fix another hearing and hope the minister will come, but this didn't happen.
Obviously.
Until the Corte Costituzionale... Supreme Court. Maybe,
yeah. Well, we can call it the Constitutional Court.
Constitutional Court said this law was not
acceptable
for the principle of our Constitution.
Exactly, but again, meantime, certain trials had been interrupted because of the statute of limitations. And so on.
The goal is always reached because the time passes and the trial dies.
Yeah.
For starvation, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it must be said that, I mean, this seems maybe ridiculous to non-Italian listeners that we have this statute of limitation. There is some logic to it because, unfortunately, the trials in Italy are ridiculously long, mainly because the magistrature doesn't have the resources it needs to deal with all the trials. There may be some political stuff in it. Some people say certain magistrates are not doing their job well, and I'm sure there may be someone, but fundamentally...
Too few magistrates.
There are too few magistrates.
The laws are very...
vague?
Very complex, like
okay.
in a Byzantine regime, you know. It's like...
So old Byzantium still has an influence over us, despite the fact that centuries and centuries have passed.
We have to simplify the laws,
so
criminal law, and have more magistrates judging, because and shortening the
statute of limitations.
The statute of limitation is not the right way.
No,
and think the law that we have now that stops the
statute of limitation.
At the first grade is not constitutionally equal. It will be wiped out
by the Constitutional Court. Yeah, I don't know if we said this before, but you have your first level of trial, then you can appeal, then you can reappeal, basically.
Yes, reappeal. First grade, you can talk about the process itself.
Mm-hmm.
The third grade, it's only about law. Procedural law.
Procedural law, okay. So if there's something wrong on a procedural level. Okay. And so, the third Berlusconi government, a few less, also it didn't last as long, so a bit less time to do these leggi ad personam. This is also the era in which, and I don't know if you agree with this analysis, Matteo, I don't think something like the Berlusconi phenomenon could happen today, because whereas in 1994, indeed, we basically had 6 channels, now... I think we would have trouble, with all of the viewing possibilities. I personally have not watched Rai or Mediaset for 10, 15 years, I think. So it couldn't happen in the same way today. Also with social media and so on, which, interestingly, in the podcast in Bunga Bunga, they do list as part of his downfall, because, now these girls at the sex parties could walk in with a video camera and film what was going on. And so on. And so he has a little bit less time to do these leggi ad personam. Some of them are an attempt to stop this phenomenon, so to try and block the spread of Sky television in Italy, so increasing VAT for Sky, trying to block television rights for Sky so that his television stations could have an advantage. But mainly, as is pointed out in the podcast, this was the series, this was the government, this was the legislature in which Berlusconi just let loose with being a dirty old pervert, basically.
It's a sad ending. Sad ending, because it's like a bigger actor or singer. His greatest hits have gone.
His time has passed.
These leggi ad personam of the last period are not.
Yes. He doesn't come up with these pearls of illegal pearls.
He's lost his touch.
He's lost his touch. And though we have him showing up in 2009 to the birthday party of an 18-year-old, who first of all claims that he was an old friend of her father's, when in reality we know that she was headhunted by Emilio Fede, who we haven't had time to talk about yet, but that would be...
Where is Emilio Fede?
Where is Emilio Fede? We'll talk, we have the where they ended up section, and we'll see where he is. Just a reminder, if you haven't heard the Bunga Bunga podcast, Emilio Fede was a Rete 4, so Channel 4 journalist. Journalist? That's a big word for Emilio Fede,
he had a past in Italian broadcast television, Rai. Mm-hmm. He was a normal people. Then he began to follow his leader. He became just like in the Nazi regime.
Yeah, the propaganda minister.
Goebbels.
He was the propaganda minister, exactly. With level. I mean, I remember one time. He opened the broadcast almost crying about how cruel everyone was to Berlusconi, and think of his children watching these things on television, how,
he did so much for Silvio, but Silvio forgot about him.
Yeah, he left him high and dry. Yeah, as happened with various of his friends. So we have, as we were saying, the Neo-Militis, and then we have the whole Rubygate issue. And Bunga Bunga, the podcast, really points to the Rubygate thing as being the element that brought Berlusconi down. And I think it's definitely an important moment, especially if you take it as a symbol of that period of the sex parties, of the young girls, etc., etc. I think it's a bit of a limitation to say that's what brought him down. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so just to put everyone in the picture, in case you didn't listen to the podcast, a young Egyptian girl, Karima Al-Maroug, was one of the participants in Berlusconi's sex parties. Now, Berlusconi has always claimed that he's never paid for sex, that one of the great things about him is his ability to conquer women, etc., etc. But it's demonstrated that these parties, women were paid to go to these parties and have sex with the old men at these parties. And among these was a 17-year-old girl, Karima Al-Maroug, who went by the show name, let's say, or pseudonym of Ruby. Ruby Rubacuori, Ruby the Heart Stealer. And so Ruby ends up one evening in the police station because she has stolen something from her roommate. And the police station in Milan receives a call from none other than the Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, saying that they absolutely have to release this girl. She is the niece of then Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, and that if they don't release her, it could cause a big international diplomatic scandal. And, I mean, obviously it's totally false. It's not true. She has absolutely nothing to do with Hosni Mubarak. But the thing is, and this to show you how much the Italian parliament and much of Italy was a prisoner of this man and his influence, at a certain point we had 314 members of the Italian parliament who, in a session of parliament, voted to declare that indeed, on that night in which Ruby was arrested, it was, according to the Italian state, she was the niece of Hosni Mubarak. And the parliament voted on this.
Unbelievable.
We had a parliamentary vote on this to say that this, at the time, was believed to be true. And so it can't but go downhill from there.
And the niece of, if she was the niece of Hosni Mubarak, she had not immunity anyway.
Anyway, no, but the problem was to avoid an international. I've always wondered in this, what the hell Mubarak thought. He's like saying, you know what?
He said nothing. He said
nothing. Also because I think Mubarak may have been one of Berlusconi's friends on the international scene. He was friends with Putin.
Affinity.
Some kind of affinity there with
the most
Arab
interesting thing in this case was what he said, his lawyer. He said, we were talking about these prostitutes that come in his villas having party, and his lawyer said Silvio Berlusconi was only the l'utilizzatore finale,
the final
user of these girls. To defend him, he said he was only the final user.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
And indeed, in
fact, all the people that
his pimps, so the guys who were convicted. So Emilio Fede,
that searched for girls and had a sort of casting of these girls and paid them not with his money. Money comes from
Berlusconi.
From the ragioniere,
the accountant,
the accountant of Berlusconi. And Emilio Fede
and also the Tarantini. There was a famous figure of Tarantini who was basically a high-level pimp, level.
They were convicted, and I don't know if Tarantini has been convicted.
No, I'm not sure.
Emilio Fede has been convicted for sfruttamento della prostituzione.
Yeah, exploitation of prostitution. And it was interesting recently because he's under house arrest,
Yes.
Emilio Fede, and he recently violated house arrest because he wanted to go and have a nice romantic dinner with his wife.
In Napoli.
Naples. He's under house arrest in Milan, so it was important to go.
And he's been arrested just outside the restaurant by the police.
Exactly. I'm wondering his wife, unless he was able to convince her that he was just...
Evasione, evasione.
It was an escape from prison, basically. So I imagine something was added to his sentence for that. So to sort of conclude, I would say that, the fall of Berlusconi, Ruby's definitely a part of it, I think, Matteo. But that's not... I think if Italy had been in a good economic position in 2011, the year in which Silvio Berlusconi fell, maybe Ruby would not have been his downfall at that time. Maybe it would have come later. But I think what really hit home in that year, I mean, we were in our lifetime what was an unprecedented economic slump. It was the backlash from the 2008 American economic crisis. And I mean, it was a period in which families would have trouble reaching the end of the month and could not buy food for their children. And you had this man who is swimming in money telling you that no, it's not true, everything is fine. The restaurants are full. Do you remember that time? He says, everything is fine, the restaurants are full. I mean, of course, the restaurants he goes to, I'm sure they were full. And, when people are, even if they voted for Berlusconi, when you're sitting home and you're maybe you're hungry or, you're starting to accumulate debt, you can't pay your bills, and this guy is telling you, everything is fine, the restaurants are full, I think there's something really started to crack.
The crack occurs when there was a tragic event in November 2011. The president of the Republic, which is Napolitano, called him at the
Quirinale, the palace,
and told him to give up.
Yeah,
because Italy was close to
default. Yeah. Indeed,
he's been forced to give resignation.
Yeah. It was also. I mean, Europe intervened, and some of the pro Berlusconi people go on about how it was a European plot and thank God we had Europe to help us out, to bail us out of that situation. I mean, please organize more European plots, please. And so, I think if you ask an Italian, the average Italian that year, what word would have been on their mind, it wouldn't have been Ruby or Rubygate, etc., which would have been on their mind, but I think it would have been the famous spread. I don't know if you remember the obsession with the spread, Matteo.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, what is the spread? The spread is the spread is the difference between Italian government bonds, BTP, and the German bonds. So I'm not a big economics expert, but basically a government bond, the value of a government bond shows the trust that investors have in that government. So if your government is stable and strong, etc., the government bonds will be safer, but at the same time they will not give you as much return on your investment. If things are a bit shakier, then the government bonds maybe will not be such a guarantee, but you can cash in a bit more. And basically, so that showed the difference between the trust investors had in the Italian government and in the German government. And this spread, which started the year around 130 points, at some point reached 500.
Much more than now under COVID crisis.
Exactly. Much
doubled
more.
It doubled it.
Exactly. But then that's a whole other story because, I mean, luckily for once, the Italian government was a leader in a good response to the COVID. So anyway, it was a bit strange to be in that position.
If Berlusconi was in charge now, what would happen? I don't know. I don't really know.
Let's close up and we can say, because he had COVID. Berlusconi had COVID, but we'll get to that. So, to close things up, we are in the autumn, almost winter of 2011. Whether it was Rubygate, whether it was the spread, whether it was a European plot. Probably it was all of those things together. Silvio Berlusconi's third government fell. The president of the Republic, Napolitano, intervened, and Mario Monti was assigned the task of forming a technical government. And since then, Silvio Berlusconi has gradually disappeared from the political scene as of yet.
Grazie, signore.
So it's not meno male che Silvio c'è, ma meno male che Silvio non c'è più. As in, thank God, the theme song of Silvio Berlusconi was meno male che Silvio c'è. So thank God that there is Silvio. And we were just saying that thank God Silvio's not there anymore. Since then, so the government fell, Mario Monti intervened with his austerity. He's very much hated by a wide part of the population, but, that was the job that needed to be done at the time. There was nothing else that we could have done at that time.
Dirty work. He had to do dirty work.
He had to do the dirty work that hadn't been done before. It was interesting, I was listening...
Nobody elected could do this.
No. Nobody who was looking to be re-elected could have done it either. And it was interesting that in the podcast they interviewed the ex-editor-in-chief of The Economist, who said that in the time that Berlusconi led Italy, only 2 countries in the world had slower growing economies, and those were Zimbabwe and Haiti. So it was a country that was in serious need of some economic help. And so that's basically the story of Silvio Berlusconi up until 2011. Since then, we've had interesting government experiences, but that's a story for another day, maybe. Let's see where they ended up. We said Emilio Fede is still under house arrest. He's followed by social services. He's under probation now.
Yeah.
Under probation.
Marcello Dell'Utri is in jail.
Okay. Among his buddies... Marcello Dell'Utri, you said, is in jail. Just a reminder, Marcello Dell'Utri was the creator of Forza Italia, of Silvio's party in the early 90s when he created it, and the go-between man between the Sicilian mafia and the investment in Berlusconi's early real estate empire, i.e. Milano 2. Marcello Dell'Utri is now in prison. Okay, then Cesare Previti, who was in the podcast, they put it very well. They said that Vittorio Dotti was Berlusconi's legal affairs lawyer. Cesare Previti was his illegal affairs lawyer, and he was sentenced for
Corruzione in atti giudiziari.
Okay, for corruption of judges. Okay, yeah.
He bought.
He bought the Mondadori sentence, yeah.
For Silvio Berlusconi.
For Silvio Berlusconi, obviously not for himself. And then, the podcast mentions and plays a little bit of this very colourful pro-Berlusconi character, which is Vittorio Sgarbi, who was always known for exploding on television, shouting at people. And he was recently physically removed from Parliament for refusing to wear a mask. So he's still around, shouting at people. Okay, as far as his allies go, Gianfranco Fini of Alleanza Nazionale, who we mentioned at the beginning, could have been Italy's chance at a, let's say, constitutional, also serious centre-right party, has disappeared from the scenes. Umberto Bossi, because the Lega and Berlusconi have always had this love-hate relationship. After the first time that Bossi, then the Lega, made the first Berlusconi government fall, Bossi declared that he would never go with Berlusconi again. Berlusconi declared that he would never go with Bossi again, and then in the next election they were together again. So Bossi was also condemned for fraud, okay? And to this day, the magistrates are still hunting down 49 million euros that the Lega seems to have managed to make disappear. And that's how some of Berlusconi's henchmen ended up. As far as the victims of the famous Editto Bulgaro, the journalists who were sent basically away from Rai, Enzo Biagi actually managed to make it back, thanks also to a series of legal battles that ended in his favour, and luckily he managed to end his days as a Rai journalist as he would have wanted. There was a little bit of a battle between Berlusconi and his daughters over Biagi's legacy and how actually things went down. Daniele Luttazzi, the comedian on whose program Marco Travaglio appeared, never reappeared on television. He wasn't the greatest comedian, to be honest. I mean, it was very brave of him to interview Travaglio in that case, but he wasn't the top notch. Another journalist which was sent away, Michele Santoro, came back and did some programs as well. And Marco Travaglio, who actually broke the news and wrote the book about Berlusconi's start in real estate, after some period in which he was outside of mainstream journalism, has done quite well for himself. Now he has his own newspaper, his Fatto Quotidiano. He founded and he runs his own newspaper, which is one of the 3 or 4 more successful in Italy. And he is a regular guest on various weekly and daily programs. So
he writes books.
And he's written lots of books, and you can look him up to.
He came out.
He came out on top in the end there. And Ilda Boccassini, Ilda the Red, which who is mentioned repeatedly in the podcast, ended up her career as a successful magistrate. She has now retired, and so that Matteo leaves the good man himself. Silvio Berlusconi has since actually been nailed for tax fraud, if I'm not mistaken. That was the only thing so far he's actually been condemned for.
Yes, frode fiscale.
Yeah, tax fraud. And
like Al Capone.
Exactly. All of the things Al Capone had done, murder, he was caught on tax fraud. That's an interesting parallel.
Scuso con Al Capone.
You apologise to... I don't... Yeah, well, we have some various parallels you can draw there as well. So, Silvio has had COVID. And obviously, in the words of Silvio, his case of COVID was the worst and most infectious and with the worst symptoms ever.
He was proud of this.
Yeah, he was very, very proud of
catch
this.
The worst one.
Yeah, he was very happy about that. And to be honest, I think that's the first we've heard of him in quite a while, because now you see him occasionally as somebody's confused old uncle, assisted by maybe members of his political party, pointing him in the right direction.
He's got a new girlfriend.
He has a new girlfriend, and she
50 years
younger. Only 50.
Yes.
So that 50. Puts her in her. That puts her in her 30s. Yes. That's quite old for Berlusconi. It's quite old for Berlusconi. And so he's got a new girlfriend. He's now, I'd say, around 84. Going on 85.
He bought a new soccer team.
Yes. Well, one thing.
Monza.
Yeah, podcast mentions that he took AC Milan to great heights, and then at a certain point during the 2000s, I believe, he sold AC Milan, and now he's bought another team, Monza, and he has declared that Monza will be a Serie A, a top league team soon enough, and will be able to beat AC Milan.
But Monza, it's a small town.
It's a very small town.
Glory days have gone.
Yeah, although, we have some small towns in Serie A, Sassuolo, Kiev, etc., who knows. And basically we don't really see at the moment how Berlusconi could get back into politics. His party, which in 1994 in 8 weeks became the strongest party with the most votes in Italy, has now gone down to about a 5.9%, which would now barely get his party into parliament. And so, unless he can cook up some big last surprise, it seems we may have seen the end of Silvio Berlusconi. But when Silvio is concerned, you can never say never. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as my co-host, Matteo Marconi, and I enjoyed recording it. Thanks very much in general to everyone for listening. I'd like to thank some new Patreon supporters. I don't know if I've already thanked them, but it doesn't hurt to be thanked twice, does it? So thank you very much and welcome aboard to Edwin, Mikkel, Jeff, and Mike. Then, as always, thanks very much to my usual Patreon supporters, starting with the first part of the Margherita Hack and Galileo Galilei level, Anthony G, Brian J, Celane, Chanel, Chris, David L, Dean V, Douglas, Elizabeth, Greg, Ignazio, Jeffrey, Old John in Milwaukee, and Kevin. And of course the tippy top, Maria Montessori and Dante Lighieri level, Paolo, Lisa K, JW, Andrew M, Brandon S, Maxime, David, and Sen. Remember, if you are so inclined, you can get in touch. hello@ahistoryofitaly.com if you would like to just say hello, make a comment, ask a question, or why not, share an interesting recipe, if you will. At the same URL, ahistoryofitaly.com, you can click through to our social media where you can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook and even on Instagram. You can go to our support page and become one of the above-mentioned Patreon supporters and have access to extra content. The latest episode, for example, of News Cappuccino is about interesting political parties in Italy, and especially the Party of Love. You can also, if you are feeling generous, support us on PayPal. Thank you very much. And once again, thanks to everyone for listening, and until next time, arrivederci.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.